All right, welcome everybody around the world. Welcome to all my subscribers. I'm going to have a very intriguing video for everybody today. I'm not going to try and claim that the verses that I have will 100% prove it conclusively, but the verses that I have are highly suggestive that at the coming of the end days, at some point during the end days, just before and probably even during when God arrives with the Messiah, that there will be an attack from giants. Okay? Now, and the verses seem to suggest that God will somehow be using these giants, similar to how he used the Medes and Persians to overthrow Babylon, and different nations were used at different times. You know what I mean? But it's very, very interesting, and it's worth considering. Now, ironically, for the last few years, I have not been talking about end days giants. And I say ironic because about 7 years ago on YouTube, when I made my first YouTube channel that doesn't exist anymore, on that channel there, I was all about that the giants were coming in the end days. And I had various reasons and sources for why this might happen. There's a lot of other native culture or ancient cultures, rather, from around the world that say such will happen. Even in Islam in North America, there's traditions of it, that they'll come out from the mountains and attack the people, and probably even elsewhere. But it's been so many years since I've dabbled in that belief. But anyways, originally I was possibly even the first, besides Steve Quayle, who was talking about giants coming in the end days. Mind you, back then, when I was about 18 years old, for example, that's going back way further now, Christians didn't believe in giants, right? As a Christian, I used to go around telling people about giants. Nobody wanted to listen to me. People were demonizing me, calling me, like wrong or apostate or heretical or believing in nonsensical things. And I was like, well, it's in the Bible. Giants are in the Bible. Nobody that I was aware of knew about it. Very few people online were talking about it. But in terms of YouTube, I don't think anybody was talking about end days giants. So back then, I started to tell people in the church. Anyways, long story short, in my church specifically, for example, nobody believed in giants. But many years later, when I went back to church, I heard them talking and teaching about giants in one of the sermons. So it was nice to see that change, and a lot more Christians are talking about giants. But nonetheless, Steve Quayle was one of the few who used to come out and talk about giants in relation to the end days. And he was. But at that time, when I came out making my videos, putting in the scripture and the verses that I used to use, it was one of the first, right? One of the first people to talk about it. And I really, really believed that it would happen. But after a few, and it was a very popular topic, right? I had not just on end days, but with giants altogether. I had videos. The giants videos were about 1 million views. Like, they were very popular on my older channels. But nonetheless, after a few years, I kind of gave up on that belief. I don't really know why. There was never overwhelming scripture that says it will happen. So anyways, basically, it's been many years now, and not that many people are talking about it because there's not really any concrete scripture for it, we think, right? However, I want to dabble back into that, plow through it and look at the verses again and try to think of other verses that I haven't considered that could support that concept. Because there is reason to believe that these things could happen. It fits the parameter of Revelations 9, which I'll read about again. I've had prophetic dreams of the end days that always involve giants. A lot of other people have too. So, I mean, there's all these other elements. And like I said, the ancient cultures that talk about it. There's just too many dots connected that would suggest that it probably will biblically take place. So I wanted to revisit the verses in the Bible and see if there's any in the Bible itself, not going into the book of Enoch. You know what I mean? I got nothing against First Enoch. I think it was ancient canon. But you can't bring out the book of First Enoch and prove things to Judaism and Christianity because most people don't believe that book. So I wanted to look in the Bible and find verses in the Bible. So what I did is I found, like I said, I got Revelation 9 from the New Testament, but keeping it in Tanakh, I've got a whole pile of verses from there as well to read. It's very, very interesting. Now, I will say the only term that is being used here in these verses is Gibborim. And Gibborim, I don't believe, exclusively identifies a person or a being as a giant. Gibborim implies that they're very powerful, strong, like a hero. Okay, but it doesn't necessarily imply that they are a giant. They could be a giant in their valor, in their heroic nature. So that's its definition is more on the side of mightiness and being like a valiant or a successful hero rather than being giant. Now, there are terms in the Bible that describe the giants. We have the term giant. We have the, what is it? Nephilim is mentioned, but we won't get into that because that doesn't necessarily denote size. But giant does denote size. That word is in the Bible. There's Rephaim. Now, whilst the definition of Rephaim isn't, directly defined as giant, the thing is there's a tapestry of connected verses in the Tanakh that identify certain well-known giants, such as the Anakim, who are described as being very large, even in Jewish tradition. In their, I don't know what the proper term is, but I'll say traditions. I wouldn't say legends. But the Anakim were huge. Okay, and the Bible talks about the Anakim being massive. The people felt or looked like grasshoppers in comparison, and that could put them at 20 plus feet tall, right? Like the Anakim were implied to be very massive. They had cities and walls that were built way up into the sky, and when the spies saw them, their hearts melted, and they just felt it's impossible to take that land, right? They also took a cluster of grapes from that land in the Bible, and one cluster of grapes took 2 men to support it on a giant beam. So that goes into what the legends and lore about this giant land was that it was flowing with milk and honey. I mean, maybe they even had giant bovines. There's tradition of giant bovines, giant cows and oxen and such in many different cultures around the world, especially in Europe and stuff like that there and in Egypt. And it's entirely possible that there probably were maybe some very big ones. The ancient aurochs were much bigger than what we have today. But I mean, if we're talking about big giants existing, there could have been big bees, for example. I know it sounds crazy, but if you're talking about fruit and everything else is big in this land, and in the Jewish tradition about the Anakim being so huge that even their pomegranates were like the size of small caves, and a few people could huddle inside the shell of one. When you patch all this together, and the Bible describes it as a land flowing with milk and honey, and cows are very ripe for milk. They actually dribble milk from their teats. I never knew that until recent years. I just never knew. So when you have a field of cows and they're doing their dribble, that could produce little streams in the real world. But if you're talking about very large cows, it probably would ironically make rivers of milk, and rivers of honey could be easily achieved if you just had some large bees. Let's just say we do have the Asian giant hornet, for example. That doesn't make honey, I know that, but there are giant versions of regular sized things, and there could have been giant bees back then. God did say that he used the hornets or maybe bees to attack and wipe out many of the tribes of the giants, okay, to pave the way for Israel to find its way to the land. So it's possible that if you have these giant hives, that they could literally drip honey and you'd have little streams of honey. So it's interesting to think about those things, but this land was like that. Okay, and in the Bible, the Anakim are clearly described as giants who inhabit this like mystical, in a sense, legendary land of giant things where everything is just big, it's plentiful. And they're presented as being so intimidating and large that just the people felt powerless against them. They, and God was angry at them for that. So they're clearly giants. And then it's connected that the Anakim are children of Anak. Anak was the son of Arba, that the city of Hebron was renamed after it was originally named, I should say, Kiriath Arba, which was city of Arba. Arba was said to be a great one among the Anakim. So we begin to see a history here. So these giants inhabited the land, and not too far from these lands was the land of Bashan with King Og, who the Bible describes was a giant, and he is described as being one of the last of Rephaim, similar to Goliath and his brothers in Gath and those like cities. They are described as being the last of the Rephaim. And there are verses that connect it and say that the Anakim are Rephaim. Okay, so we see the connection that Rephaim were definitely giants. Okay, we had the Valley of the Giants, Valley of the Rephaim. All these things are connected because they are giants. Okay, Anakim, whatever size Anakim were, they may have been bigger than Og, maybe the same size. We don't need to fuss about size, but at the end of the day, Rephaim were giants, Anakim were giants. There are many tribes of giants, Zamzumim, the Emim, and at the end of the day, Gibborim doesn't directly imply giant, like I was saying, but Gibborim could very well be giants in any given case, and you'd have to look at the verses in the text and see what it's actually saying to see if it gives any reason to support the idea that that particular verse is talking about a giant. Now, the good thing is that when we look up the term mighty one, which would be Gibbor, in the Tanakh, not searching in the Hebrew, right? That does yield slightly different number of results. But to make the study a little bit easier, I went through all 105, I think it is, occurrences of mighty one, and there's quite a few. And often the term is being used to describe, from all we can tell, just people, right? No reason to believe that they're giants. But there are a few verses, and these are the ones I'm going to read here today, because these verses describe the Gibborim as being what could only be giants. Okay, so I'm not going to present this evidence because I'm trying to claim that any mention of the word Gibborim means a giant. I already stressed that, made that clear, but Gibborim can mean giant. And you have to look at the other evidence describing the individual to see if there's any reason to believe that they could be a giant. Okay, and also there's a few verses that talk about the Gibborim coming at the end of days before the arrival of presumably God and Messiah. So when you patch those things together, connect those dots, Gibborim are most likely giants. Not always, but most likely they could be giants. Let's be more accurate, I guess. The Gibborim could very well be giants, okay? And they will arrive at the time of the end days. So those are facts. Are the Gibborim that arrive before the end days giants? Well, we have to look at the verses that describe them to see if they could be giants. So let's get started here. There's some very interesting stuff, right? So we'll start off with the search for mighty one. Like I said, 105 occurrences in the Bible. That's 102 in the Old Testament, 3 in the New Testament. The vast majority of these are just talking about people from all we can tell. However, if we go down to, I'll read this one first and get it out of the way. In 1 Chronicles 1:10, and this just a light little piece of evidence. It says, and Cush begat Nimrod. He, Nimrod, began to be a mighty one in the land. Okay, so I'll just quickly mention here, what I'm about to say is not biblical, so this is just a light little piece of evidence. But according to ancient traditions, Nimrod was described as and depicted as a giant who was much larger than other people, and he was specifically large enough to be able to pick up lions, and probably strong enough and brave enough to pick up lions under his arms. He could carry a lion under his arms. Okay, so that's just tradition. That's not Bible. But the Bible does use the term Gibbor to describe Nimrod. Okay, so I'll just start with that one there to get it out of the way. But I do have two verses here that describe Gibborim, specific individual Gibborim from the Bible narrative. And these ones are described as it could only be giants. So 1 Chronicles 11:11. It says, and this is an account of the mighty ones, the Gibborim, whom David has. There's Jashobim, son of a Hakmonite, is head of 30. He is lifting up his spear against 300, wounded at one time. So now picture this. If you want to believe that the Bible is an accurate document, and it's not exaggerating, making things foofy, the only way that that individual, okay, what was his name, Jashobim or something, okay, he wounded 300 people at one time with his spear. You could not achieve that with a regular 5 or 6 or 7 foot spear that a person would normally yield for battle, or even shorter. You would have to be a massive giant in order to pull that off and to injure, not necessarily slay, but injure 300 people at once. Okay, the only other way for anybody to defeat that many or wound that many opponents at once would be to roll or throw, whether you're a giant or people using a catapult, some giant boulder or a tree log and stuff like that. That's the only way, like some type of mortar fire or just something that's so big that it will wipe out a path of people. That's the only way you could take out that many people. So if you have a single individual wiping out 300, okay, it says he used a spear. So we don't have to imagine him catapulting things at people. It says he used a spear. So he might. I highly doubt that he threw the spear and took out 300. Now maybe he did. Maybe there were just hundreds of thousands of people lined up and they took out 300. Or maybe he swung it like a club. That would be a lot. But however he did it, that's 300 people. But there's something more interesting and incredible than that, because if we go up to let's see, 2 Samuel 23:8, we have another example in very similar fashion. It says, "These are the names of the mighty ones, the Gibberim, whom David hath. Sitting in the seat is the Tachmonite, head of the captains. He is Adino." So this is a different being, different person, giant. His name is Adino. Now, how big and strong was Adino? Check this one out. It says, "Adino, who hardened himself against 800, wounded at one time." So this guy's here was almost 3 times as effective as Joshabim, or whatever his name was. Okay? These could only be giants, right? So these are Gibberim mentioned, described as mighty ones, who are definitely giants. That's how they're able to do that. Okay? So, I mean, 800 people at once is so fantastic. I would even accept it just saying he alone killed 800 people in one battle, because I don't think any regular sized human could defeat or injure 800 people in one battle, right? So anyways, but that's a very good reason to believe that those Gibberim were giants. Okay, now if we go down later in the Tanakh here, actually wait, okay, I'll get to that in its time. There's a verse from Isaiah 13, but I'll read that last, because that may or may not be, it's not specifically talking about the end days, but what it describes is in parallel to what will happen at the end days. So I'll just leave that towards the end to read. There's a verse from, I believe it's Zephaniah as well. But where it gets interesting is down in the book of Joel. Let's get down here. So in Joel, in Joel 2:7 and in Joel 3:9. So let me just read Joel 3:9 first, in case I forget, because Joel 2 is quite large. It says, proclaim ye this among nations, sanctify a war, stir up the mighty ones, stir up the Gibberim, come nigh, come up, let all the men of war. And then in Joel 3:11 it says, haste and come in, all ye nations around, and be gathered together. Thither cause to come down, O God, thy mighty ones, thy Gibberim. So in Joel 3, it definitely talks about mighty ones, Gibberim, being called down. Stir up the mighty ones. Everybody's gathered together for war, and the mighty ones, the Gibberim, arrive. And they could very well be giants. Maybe not all of them are giants, but they're all mighty ones, right? Even if they're not giants, they fight like a giant. You know what I mean? Or they're a giant in their, in just how magnificent they are on the battlefield, right? But if we go to Joel 2, we read what the prophecy says, which is clearly a prophecy about the end days. It talks about what most likely is giants. Okay, and check this out. So in Joel 2, verse 1, blow ye a trumpet in Zion, and shout ye in my holy hill. Tremble, do all inhabitants of the earth, for coming is the day of God, for it is near. A day of darkness and thick darkness, a day of cloud and thick darkness. Now that's very much like, that is what Revelation 9 says will happen. Okay, and in Revelation 9, it goes dark when the earth, the pit on the earth is opened up and the imprisoned ones are released. This army of, fallen angels and their minions. And it doesn't say that these beings are giants, but old tradition shows that fallen angels were massive and giant. And it's just fair to assume that there could be giants amongst them, right? But those are some assumptions, right? But what it says here in Joel 2 does match with the events Revelation 9, meaning that the earth will go dark and this is the day of God. That is what's taking place literally in Revelation 9. But what it says next is darkness spread on the mountains. And it says a people numerous and mighty. Okay, so we have the term there, mighty. Doesn't mean they're giants, right? But it does mention the word. It says, like it there has not been from of old, and after it there is not again. Now, is this because they are an army of very huge giants, or it's just the biggest army of regular sized humans that the earth has ever seen? We're left to speculate. But it says, and after it there is not again, an army like it, till the years of generation and a generation. And it says, before it consumed as fire, and after it burned as a flame, as the Garden of Eden is the land before it, and after it a wilderness, a desolation, and also an escape there has not been to it. What that verse means is that this force, this army is so destructive that they could pass through the most bountiful, beautiful land, and they will destroy it as they go through it. By the time they leave that land, it will be in utter destruction and desolation. That's what that verse is saying. And then it says, as the appearance of horses is its appearance, and as horsemen, so they run. As the noise of chariots on the tops of the mountains, they skip. As the noise of a flame of fire devouring stubble. As a mighty people set in array for battle. Two interesting things from verse 5 here. It says, on the tops of the mountains, they skip. So I looked up the Hebrew in the original of this, and the word definitely is translated and is defined as to skip around or leap. Okay, now humans, regular sized humans, don't skip over mountains or on the tops of mountains. They don't leap on the tops of mountains. Okay, it's far more likely that these are giants. The larger you are, the more distance you're covering when you do a leap and a bound. Okay, so that's the first thing that is suggestive that these are giants that will be arriving. So it says, as the noise of chariots. So if you can picture the sound of chariots, so you have chariot wheels, horses stomping, and all this big, heavy footsteps stomping, and just like an army of them. You could only imagine what that would be like. That's the sound of this army skipping across the tops of mountains. Okay, just factor that in. There's probably so many of them. It's so loud and just like barreling that that's what's taking place. And it says, as the noise, oh, I already read that. And it says, from its face pained our peoples, all faces have gathered paleness. So everybody will be flabbergasted by the arrival of this army. In verse 7, it says, as mighty ones, as Gibborim, they run. Now, all humans can run. So why they would say as mighty ones they run and not imply giants. You follow me? They must have been implying giants by saying as mighty ones they run. The larger you are, the quicker you run. If you were hypothetically a Titan, which are said to be 450 feet tall, your stride is whatever. Once I worked out the numbers, right? I don't have them written down in front of me anymore. But just like the human, if you're 6 feet tall, your stride is roughly 3 feet, right? If you're 450 feet tall, whatever the number was, you get the idea. The fact is, I calculated it and going and comparing it to regular human walking speed and jogging speed and running speed. What I found is that their stride is so huge that they actually break the sound barrier when they move their leg to walk, because their leg is physically going that far of a distance. I don't know if the shape determines whether it makes a sonic boom, but going by the numbers, their leg, just swinging their leg forward to walk at a walking, I think it was at walking pace, they would be breaking the sound barrier because that much distance is traveled that quickly. That's pretty astonishing. And if they were to jog or sprint, I mean, it's astronomical how fast they could go. So we're not necessarily talking about giants that big, but that's one set of numbers that I did work out. But if you're talking about a 20-foot giant even, or a 10-foot giant, they're going to make Usain Bolt look like a slug, okay? They're going to run so fast you wouldn't even be able to comprehend it. So it would make more sense that, again, this is suggesting that they're giants, right? As mighty ones they run. As men of war they go up a wall. In each in his own ways they do go, and they embarrass not their paths, meaning they don't, if they make the decision, I want to go this way, nothing's going to stop them. Nothing's going to make them alter their path, right? They're like juggernauts. And it says, each his brother, they press not, each in his way they go on. And here's another interesting thing. It says, if by the missile, which means projectile, they fall, they are not cut off. So you can hit these things with projectiles, the people, and they don't fall. Now, I don't think this is an allusion to bulletproof vests, because they had metallic armor back in the day that was pretty good, and leather armor that probably would still have stopped bullets. Okay. However, okay, I mean, they're pretty good at stopping bows. They're being shot from, like, 1,000 feet or whatever, something crazy. They're traveling probably as fast as a bullet. I don't know. By the time they come plummeting down, they have a sharp point. And the armor back then used to stop those things and stop with it when they had slingshots and other little, like, forms of rock or whatever catapults. So ancient armor was pretty good at deflecting stuff like that. I'm pretty sure that this verse is talking about something a little bit more than just bullets. You know what I mean? If by the missile, the projectile, they fall, they're not cut off. So maybe it's just suggestive, but it's quite suggestive that these aren't meager humans. Okay? So if you picture an army of people invading, like in every war today, you got those people, they got on their army armor, bulletproof vests even. We all seen enough war videos to know that when people get shot, even if they have their armor on or whatever, they still go down. But the way Joel is describing this is these beings, these mighty ones, come in like juggernauts. They're destroying things as they go through. Nothing is stopping their path that they're plowing. And you could shoot them with projectiles and they don't fall down. That doesn't come across like describing a regular sized human army, right? An army of regular sized humans. But going on, it says, in the city they run to and fro, on the wall they run, into houses they go up by the windows, they go in as a thief. Now, again, this could just be talking about regular sized humans using ladders or scaling the walls like Batman to go up inside people's homes and rob them, or it could be talking about big giants who might be tall enough to look through your windows on the upper levels and reach through and grab you. Okay, so again, it's just suggestive, but we have mentions of the term mighty ones more than once and multiple descriptions that would make more sense that it's talking about giants. Uh, in verse 5, sorry, where it said, on the tops of the mountains they skip, it says, as a mighty people set in array for battle. I looked up the Hebrew here, wondering if it's some form of Gibor or Gibborim, but it's actually a different word. So what the word is atsum, okay, and it means mighty or numerous, great, large number, or mightier. There's more occurrences of mightier. Mighty has the most occurrences. Mighty men, mighty ones, numerous, strong, and stronger all have basically one occurrence. Okay, strong has 5, mighty has 14, mightier has 6. This is the uses of the word throughout the Bible. So that's at some. Okay, now I thought, let me go check where this word at some is used elsewhere and to see if it's used elsewhere to describe giants. Well, it was in Numbers 14:12. So if we go to that real quickly, Numbers 14 is right after we're told about the Anakim, right? So in Numbers 14:12, it says, hold up, was it that one? I don't think it was 12. I think it was 22. Where is it? I was wrong on that verse there, but still, one sec, bear with me. 13. Okay. So why would it, just bear with me one sec. Okay, so I was slightly wrong on this one here, but I think it's still worth reading nonetheless. The word atsum occurs in Numbers 14:12, where this is after they've seen the giant Anakim who inhabited the land. Okay, and God has said, no, don't be cowards. Go up and fight them. I'll help wipe them out for you using the bees and whatnot, or hailstones and everything. And go up there, have faith. I'll help you, conquer that nation and you'll take the land. That'll be your blessed land of Israel, right? So they just been told how big the giants were there, how big the cities were there. Okay. And right here in verse 12, God says, I smite it with pestilence and dispossess it and make thee become a nation greater and mightier than it. So that's the occurrence of Atzum, greater and mightier than it. Okay? I incorrectly thought that this verse was talking about how mighty the Anakim cities were, okay, or how mighty the Anakim were. But it's still a comparison to the Anakim. So we were just told in the prior chapter in Numbers 13 how big and mighty the Anakim were, right? And I'll go read that. So it establishes, like I said, it establishes how great they were. So it says in verse 28, verse 27, we came into the land whither thou hast sent us, and also it is flowing with milk and honey. And this is its fruit, talking about the giant cluster of grapes, I'm pretty sure. That's like I was talking about earlier. It says, only surely the people which is dwelling in the land is strong. These are the Anakim. And the cities are fenced, very great. And also the children of Anak we have seen there. Amalek is dwelling in the land to the south, and the Hittite and the Jebusite and the Amorite is dwelling in the hill country, and the Canaanite is dwelling by the sea and by the side of the Jordan. So all those nations that the Israelites are meant to go up and, and conquer to take the land and to become Israel, these are nations who had mingled with giants, right? So later in verse 31, it says, and the men who have gone up with Caleb said, we are not able to go up against the people, the Anakim, for it is stronger than we. So that's one mention of how these ones were mightier than the Hebrews, than Israel was, right? And it says, and they bring out an evil account of the land which they have spied unto the sons of Israel, saying, the land into which we passed over to spy it is a land eating up its inhabitants. The giants are said to be cannibals of humans. And all the people whom we saw in its midst are men of stature. So it specifically identifies that they are of large stature, right? And then it says, and there we saw the Nephilim. That's where it connects it over to Genesis 6, because in Genesis 6 it says, I don't have it open in front of me, but in Genesis 6 it uses the term, well, let me just pull it open in a second so I don't have to make it up so I can actually quote it. But Numbers 13:33 it says, and there we saw the Nephilim, sons of Anak of the Nephilim, and we are in our own eyes as grasshoppers, and so we were in their eyes. Excuse me. And they were so dismayed that in Numbers 14 it says, and the people wept all night. And then in verse 8, if God is delighted in us, then he has brought us into this land and has given it to us, a land which is flowing with milk and honey. So that's where they're trying to, stir everybody up to say, hey, look, we got to go do this, what God told us to do. And that's when in verse 12 he says, I smite it with pestilence and dispossess it and make thee become a nation greater and mightier than it. Okay, so anyway, still worth reading, right? Because, like I said, it talks about the giants. So if we go back to Joel, get back to the program here. So in verse 5, that's why I mention it again. It says, as a mighty people set in array for battle. That's as a atzum, mighty people set in array for battle. So anyways, then that's where it says, and from its face pained our peoples, all faces have gathered paleness. As mighty ones they run, as men of war they go up a wall, and each in his own ways they do go. And they embarrass not their paths. And each his brother they press not, each in his way they go on. If by the projectile they fall, they are not cut off. In the city they run to and fro, in the walls they run, into houses they go up by the windows, they go in as a thief. At their face trembled as the earth, shaken have the heavens, sun and moon have been black, and stars have gathered up their shining. So, I mean, ask yourself again, in this part here in verse 10, is it really talking about just a regular human army like we've seen countless times on this earth? It's talking about the earth itself is trembling at the presence of these ones. Well, if they are giants as they run, it would actually make the earth tremble, no pun intended, right? But when you're talking about the earth will tremble, the heavens will be shaking, the sun and moon will be going black, all these great cosmic things as well as the earth shaking. This is probably not just a meager army of regular sized people. It would make more sense that it's an army of giants. And then so that's all I need to read from Joel 2. And then it talks about how you should repent and reform. And then I don't think I need to read. It's a very large chapter. I don't think I need to read until verse 28. Verse 28 to the end, that's where it talks about people dream dreams in the end days. So, well, let me read it. And it has come to pass afterwards, I do pour out my spirit on all flesh, and prophesy of your sons and your daughters. Your old men do dream dreams, and your young men do see visions. And also on the men servants and on the maid servants in those days, I do pour out my spirit. And I have given wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. The sun is turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the day of God, the great and the fearful. So that's Joel 2. So it's definitely talking about the end of days. And this is the same chapter, verses 5 to 10 and all that, to talk the scene we talk about giants arriving. So although, like I said, it's not 100% hardcore proof that giants are arriving, like it's so verbatim. It's talking about Gibborim. So Gibborim will definitely 100% be arriving at the end days. Are these Gibborim giants? Well, like I said, we have to look at the context and what it says about them. And it does say a few things about these Gibborim that sound more like giants than regular sized people. That's my point, right? If we get back over to Joel 3, which I did remember to read, that's where it was. Which verse was it? Was it 10? Yeah. Verse 9, proclaim ye this among nations, sanctify a war, stir up the mighty ones, come nigh, come up, let all the men of war. Verse 11, hasten, come in, all ye nations around, and be gathered together, thither cause to come down, O God, thy mighty ones. So again, these are the mentions of the mighty ones, the Gibborim arriving. It says, wake and come up and let the mountain, wake and come up, let the nations unto the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there I sit to judge all the nations around. So this is the so-called Armageddon. This is definitely the end of days when all the nations are surrounding Israel and God and Messiah are about to arrive, right? And it says, send ye forth the sickle, for ripened as the harvest. Come in and come down, for filled has been the press. Overflowed has wine presses, for great is the wickedness. Multitudes, multitudes are in the valley of decision, for near is the day of God in the valley of decision. Sun and moon have been black, and stars have gathered up their shining. Now, let's see, do I need to read anything else from there? No. So it definitely talks about Gibborim coming at the end of the day. So that's all I need to read from the, no, I did have Zephaniah. This is just a minor verse. And yeah, that's Isaiah as well. So in Zephaniah 1:14, if we open that up real quick, it says, near is the great day of God, near and hasting exceedingly, the noise of the day of God, bitterly shriek, there does a mighty one, a Gibborim. So this is just a verse to throw in there, you know what I mean? I'm not saying this is any amazing evidence of anything, but if giants are arriving at this end days war, then there would be mighty ones, Gibborim, shrieking, right? And it says a day of wrath is that day, a day of adversity and distress, a day of waste and desolation, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of cloud and thick darkness. So all the same terms, a day of trumpet and shouting against the fenced cities and against the high corners. Where is it? In verse 18, and in the fire of his jealousy consumed is the whole land, for only a hastened end does he make of all the inhabitants of the land. So I just wanted to mention that one as well. It's a minor point to make. And in similar fashion from Isaiah 13, where is that? Up here. It's talking about the Medes being used to come in and overthrow Babylon, but at the same time, what it talks about is definitely, without question, a parallel to all the stuff I just read. So in Isaiah 13, it's definitely talking about the Medes because it says so. In verse 17, it says, lo, I'm stirring up against them the Medes. So that's who it's about, but it shows us a parallel. So it says, the burden of Babylon that Isaiah, son of Amos, has seen. On a high mountain lift ye up an ensign, raise the voice to them, wave the hand, and they go in the openings of nobles. And I have given charge to my sanctified ones, and I have called my mighty ones, my Gibborim, for mine anger, those rejoicing at mine excellency. I think that's the verse that Steve Quayle always used to use, ironically. There we go. I didn't think I would be able to find it. So yeah, I have called my mighty ones, my Gibborim, for mine anger. It's not necessarily giants, like I said, but could very well be giants. And it says, a voice of a multitude in the mountains, a likeness of a numerous people, a voice of noise from the kingdoms of nations who are gathered, God of hosts inspecting a host of battle. So again, some at a multitude in the mountains, a numerous people. It says they are coming in from a land afar off. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're giants because of that, but that's an interesting way of putting it. If they're just regular humans, you know what I mean? But anyways, just throwing that one out there. It says, from the end of the heavens, God and the instruments of his indignation is to destroy all the land. Howl ye, for near is the day of God, as destruction from the mighty it cometh. Therefore all hands do fail, and every heart of man does melt. In similar fashion, how we saw in Numbers 13, their hearts melted essentially when they saw the Anakim. Where is it? Verse 9, similar to the other things I read, lo, the day of God has come, fierce in wrath and heat of anger, to make the land become a desolation. Yea, its sinning ones he destroyeth from it. For the stars of the heavens and their constellations cause not their light to shine. Darkened has been the sun in its going out, and the moon causeth not its light to come forth. Anything else to read? Therefore the heavens I cause to tremble, verse 13, and the earth to shake from its place in the wrath of God of hosts, and in the day of the heat of his anger. But then it goes on to say that I'm stirring up the meads, those verses later. So even if it's not talking about the end days, it's in the exact pattern of what we've been told from Joel the end days would include. So we go and look at Revelation 9 very quickly. In Revelation 9, it says the following, and the fifth messenger, and all this is taking place in that final day, the day of God. So all these events, as I've talked about in other videos, take place in one day according to Revelation. And the fifth messenger did sound, and I saw a star out of the heaven having fallen to the earth, and there was given to it the key of the pit of the abyss. And he did open up the pit of the abyss, and there came up a smoke out of the pit as the smoke of a great furnace, and darkened was the sun in the air from the smoke of the pit. And out of the smoke came forth locusts to the earth, which I believe could very well symbolize the giants, because the Bible says that the Rephaim are within the earth, that they're created down there or born down there. I think that it says that in Isaiah, I think it is. I could look that up after if I remember. But they're down there. They rule down there somehow as well, I think it says. Well, I could read the verses, but so just like I said earlier, that all these things like connect and line up. So I think there's reason to believe it could be talking about giants. Now, locusts as creatures, they live within the earth for a period of time until they're ready to come out in their biggest, fullest form. And when they come out in huge swarms and eat everything up in sight. The way Joel in chapter 2 and 3 talked about this army of mighty ones that arrives, it destroys and eats up everything in sight. The Anakim was a land that ate up the inhabitants thereof. You follow me? So all these things kind of connect in a very interesting way. But it says, and out of the smoke came forth locusts to the earth, and there was given to them authority as scorpions of the earth have authority. But in either case, whatever the locusts are, the locusts represent an army. They're not talking about actual insects here. It's a metaphor. So it's an army that God is using the word locust to symbolize. So even if they're regular humans, whatever the army is, giants, humans, a mix of giants and humans, doesn't really matter. They are the army of mighty ones that was described in Joel and elsewhere. I mean, it is them. Okay? So anyways, because it's happening at that time when the earth is going into darkness, at the end of days, right at the very end, on the great day of God. Who else could it be? So it says, and come forth locusts to the earth, and there is given to them authority as scorpions of the earth have authority. And it was said to them that they may not injure the grass of the earth, which represents the righteous, nor any green thing, nor any tree, but only the men who have not the seal of God upon their foreheads. So, where is it? And lower down, it does describe them, such as in verse 8, and they had hair as hair of women, so long hair, and their teeth were as those of lions. And a lot of ancient accounts of giants said that they would have large canine teeth or pointy teeth. Some of them even had like tusk-like teeth that would come out. And they had breastplates as breastplates of iron, and the noise of their wings is as the noise of chariots and many horses running to battle. This is in their description of being locusts. Locusts have wings. It's obviously a metaphor. But that leads right into verse 14 when the sixth messenger sounds, and it says, loose the four messengers who are bound at the great river Euphrates. Now, these four of the fallen messengers, whoever they are, they're the fallen messengers. These are giants, probably Titan size, but nonetheless, they're giants. Okay, so if it talks about them being released, and they're coming out from underground to be released onto the surface to do battle with mankind, and slay the wicked, then it's fair to say that the locusts represent giants as well. After all, the giants were the offspring of the fallen ones, right? The fallen angels. So, anyways, they're bound. It says, loose the four messengers who are bound at the great river Euphrates, and loose were the four messengers who have been made ready for the hour, the day, the month, and the year, that they may kill the third of mankind, the third of men. And it says the number of the forces of the horsemen is 2 myriads of myriads, which would be 2 million. So potentially 2 million giants. And I heard the number of them. So that's what's mentioned. If we go to Revelation 16 very quickly, in Revelation 16, it talks, I go into this in my book and my 2023-2024 book, and also which is available on Amazon. And I talked about it on my channels a lot as well, how the book of Revelation, how it's broken down, how everything occurs in one day. Most of it occurs in 1 hour. It shows how the trumpet, seals, and vials connect in so many ways. So anyways, I show the pattern, describe it so many times, so I'm here to talk about it now. But Revelation 16, it shows one of the parallels. It says in the sixth messenger, just like we had the sixth trumpet being blown, this is the sixth vial. It says the sixth messenger did pour out his vial upon the great river the Euphrates, and dried up was its water, that the way of the kings who are from the rising of the sun may be made ready. There we go. So, and that leads right into verse 16, and they did bring them together to the place that is called in Hebrew Armageddon. So there we go, folks. So all these verses, all these connections, we can see all these connections. We definitely know that Gibborim will be arriving from the Old Testament. The New Testament, it throws in fallen angels, and a specific mysterious army will be unleashed upon the earth from underground. When you connect all the dots, it really does seem like an army of giants. So very, very quickly, if we go look up Rephaim, there's only 25 uses of Rephaim. So let's see. So in Deuteronomy 2:11, this is worth reading very quickly. In verse 10, it says, the Emim have formerly dwelt in this land, a people great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim. We already read the Anakim verse from, what was it, Numbers 13? Then it says, Rephaim, they are also reckoned. So Emim, Anakim, Rephaim, they're all one the same. So it says, Rephaim, they are reckoned. They also, as the Anakim. And the Moabites call them Emim. Okay, so that shows a connection. I referred to that earlier, right? That's where it triangulates a force. Anakim, Rephaim, they're giants, right? In Deuteronomy 2:20, a land of Rephaim, so a land of giants it is reckoned, even it. Rephaim dwelt in it formerly, and the Ammonites called them Zamzummim. And Deuteronomy 3:11, another verse that I referred to, for only King Og of Bashan has been left of the remnant of the Rephaim, of the giants. Lo, his bedstead is a bedstead of iron. We all know how big it was, 12, 13 feet. So he was probably at least 10 feet tall. Where else? Land of the Rephaim is referenced in Deuteronomy 3:13. King Og of Bashan, remnant of the Rephaim in Joshua 12:4, who is dwelling in Ashtaroth and in Edrei. Again in Joshua 13:12. Valley of the Rephaim, again in Joshua 15:8. And Joshua 17:15, it says, Joshua saith to them, if there are numerous people go up for thee to the forest, then thou hast prepared for thee there in the land of the Perizzite and of the Rephaim, the giants. The Mount Ephraim has been narrow for thee. Valley of the Rephaim, again in Joshua 18:16. It's Valley of the Rephaim is mentioned another 4 or 5 times there. Here we go in Job 26:5, right? Let's read this one here. It says the Rephaim are formed. So we all know that Rephaim are giants now, right? So the Rephaim are formed beneath the waters, also their inhabitants. Naked is Sheol. Sheol is the underworld, the world that is underneath, right? So the Rephaim are formed beneath the waters, also their inhabitants. Now we know with our modern science and exploration and technology that there are rivers, even lakes and oceans underground. Okay, there's even oceans under the oceans. That's crazy, but we've learned that now, right? It says that the giants are formed beneath the waters, also their inhabitants. Now this does go over and connect over again. Another connection to First Enoch, where it says that the giants and the fallen angels and their progeny, the giants and all that, and the monstrous hybrids and all that, were imprisoned within the earth, okay, and to be released sometime around the end days. It's very famous, a story from First Enoch. So I just wanted to mention that there. It says right here, the Rephaim are formed. That means they're created, they're born beneath the water. So it's not just ones that are sent down there, they're obviously still reproducing. The Rephaim are formed beneath the waters, also their inhabitants. Naked is the underworld over against them, and there is no covering to destruction. So that's very, very interesting, right? That's from Job 26. If we go to Proverbs 9 and open that one up, it says in verse 18, and he has not known that Rephaim are there in deep places of the underworld, her invited ones. Again, another interesting allusion to the same thing. Where is it? This one here is one of the most interesting. It's from Isaiah 14. If we open that one up, let's see. From verse 4, let me just check again what. So from 4 to 9. It says, thou hast taken up the simile concerning the king of Babylon and said, how is the exactor ceased? Ceased as the golden one, broken as God the staff of the wicked, the scepter of rulers. He who is smiting peoples in wrath, the smiting without intermission. He who is ruling in anger nations, pursuing without restraint. At rest, quiet has been all the earth. They have broken forth into singing. Even firs have rejoiced over, cedars of Lebanon, saying, since thou hast lain down, the hearer cometh not up against us. Sheol beneath, so the underworld beneath, has been troubled at thee to meet thy coming in. So what it's essentially showing is that the king of Babylon has been cast down by God. He's being punished. Now, in the Bible, I have videos on this, and I think I mentioned it possibly in my books. But nonetheless, there are verses where it says that God punished people and even tribes and nations by sending them down into the earth alive, right? He would open up the earth and send them down into it. Right, so presumably they're going to go down into the regions where all the giants were, right, which would be a hellish place to live. So this is just following same suit as all those other scenarios. That's like the ultimate casting down, as God has like not just struck you down to the earth, but like he splits open the earth and strikes you down into it, right, into a hellish place. So anyways, it says Sheol beneath has been troubled at thee. That's the underworld. To meet thy coming in is waking up for thee, Rephaim, giants, old chief ones of earth. So it actually refers to the Rephaim as being inside the earth, just like Job said, and that they are chief ones of the earth. So they must be alive and still ruling and have power. Maybe they're just slumbering. It's been often said in ancient traditions that giants could sleep for a very long period of time. They could even hibernate for very long periods. They could go without food for very long periods. A lot of accounts, such as in Greek and Roman mythology, the giants were capable of healing themselves, like their bodies would heal very well. That's why you had Prometheus chained to the rock as punishment for giving humans the forbidden knowledge of fire and technology. And Prometheus was cursed to have a giant eagle come and eat at his liver every day. The eagle would only eat enough of the liver where the liver would still be there and be able to heal itself by the next day. So it was a perpetual torment for him. Right, and a lot of cases, the fallen angels, their giant progeny, and their hybrid monster, creations, where they would hybridize with creatures or whatnot. You see the same thing. The Hydra, for example, the Hydra is famous for if you cut off one head, it just regrows. Right, there was a chief head that you had to cut off and solder or do one of a few other tricks to actually defeat the creature, because otherwise it would just regrow itself and heal. So is very interesting. I can't even remember why I mentioned that. Where is it? Oh yeah, because it says, "Wake up for the Rephaim, O chief ones of earth." Maybe they've been down there in a big slumber, going without food for a very long time. When they get woken up and released in the end days, they're going to be very, very ravenous and hungry. Just saying, right? It says, "O chief ones of earth, it is raised up from their thrones, O kings of the nations." To me, it's strongly suggesting that the Rephaim, the giants, are still alive. They're down in the earth, and they're ruling in their own kingdoms, or even they might even have influence over human kingdoms for all we know, right? So that's some pretty interesting stuff. I'm just checking to make sure there's nothing else here. Now, going back to the list for Rephaim, there's only 3 left here. Just Valley of the Rephaim again. and land of the Rephaim. So, but we have seen that one earlier verse where it connects Rephaim to giants. So Rephaim or there's few verses like King Og and the others. So Rephaim are definitely giants. Okay, Goliath is described as a giant. King Og is described as a giant. It says they are the last of the giants, the last of the Rephaim. It says that the Rephaim, the Anakim are Rephaim, the Zamzumim, the Emim are all Rephaim. They are giants. Okay, the land of Israel used to be occupied by giants. Abraham and that king Kerdalaim or whatever his name was, they fought off tribes of giants. Okay, those were the tribes that inhabited Israel at the time. Very, very interesting stuff. And that's why it's possible that the giants will emerge again in the end days. It's talking about the Euphrates River will be dried up to prepare the way for these fallen angels, for these rulers to come. And we've seen the Euphrates River dry up now. It might be because of a damn reason. But nonetheless, the Euphrates River is drying up and it's exposing all these tunnel and cave openings, right? I mean, can't even make this stuff up anymore. I mean, if it drops anymore, maybe some giant opening will be exposed and the giants will see daylight coming through and make their way out of the hole. I don't know, but if you haven't watched Attack on Titan, I would recommend that you watch season 1 of Attack on Titan from the first episode. Not only will it traumatize you, but it'll put all this into perspective. We also have, I'll end on this note as well, some real world physical evidence that has been backed up and seen and witnessed by millions of people around the world. So this is great evidence, physical, tangible evidence, are the giant sound effects that have been heard around the world. People used to think, they started in 2010, but people used to think that they're coming from the sky. I postulated many years ago on my first YouTube channel that these are actually the sounds of giants inside the earth waking up or opening. But the only reason I came up with that theory is not because I'm crazy, is because when you listen to the sounds, and these sounds have been verified, been heard by millions of people around the world. There are a lot of fake videos, but millions of people have heard these sounds. Authorities around the world have investigated them because they are real sounds. Science has even said they can identify what these sounds are in the vast majority of cases of the bona fide authentic ones. These are real, physical, tangible pieces of evidence of a titanic size in nature. I mean, it doesn't get much more giant and titanic in its description. And what these sounds almost always are, besides ones that sound like trumpets and all that, what you have to realize is, if you think outside the box, everybody's so quick to think trumpet, trumpet. Some of them are trumpet-like, but what is a trumpet? It's a large tubular metal tube that has sound waves resonating down it, producing a metallic tubular type sound. That's what a trumpet is. A lot of brass instruments work by the same principle. If you get a metal iron plumbing pipe and blow down into it, it does the same thing, right? A tin whistle works by the same premise. A metallic tube produces that type of sound when you blow down it. So if you have a big metal gate, and it's got big metal bars and tubes, and you scrape it on the ground, if you've ever moved a metal gate made of hollow metal tubes and it scrapes on the ground, they will hum and chime and boo like a brass instrument. And it sounds exactly like what's in those videos. Now, if we look at like those Bible verses I just read, that it seems to say the giants are underground. We look at and connect that to First Enoch, where it says, yes, they are underground. They're imprisoned there behind these great gates and all of that. And then we start hearing sounds around the world that sound like giant metallic gates screeching open, giant stone blocks being moved. A lot of the giant sounds literally sounded like giants growling, literally, right? I used to sift through all the clips out there, now weed out the fake ones, try to authenticate as best I could the most credible ones. And I listened to all the types of sounds. There are growls. There are things that sound like giant creatures growling. Okay, it's freaky. But giant footsteps. I mean, there is even one where whatever it was, nobody else thought it was a giant walking underground. Everybody thinking it was booms coming from dynamite or skyquakes. But they were off in the forest somewhere. I can't remember, somewhere in Colorado, I think it was, maybe it was in America. And to me, it sounded like, because it was the first time I'd heard it, and I was just hearing for what it was, and it sounded like footsteps of something huge, like Godzilla walking by, but most likely underground. And if you're in a giant cavern and you speak, everything echoes, right? So if you're walking and you're huge, it's going to echo like that. It's like a bell effect. And if the earth has like a hollow part in it, I'm not saying the earth is hollow, but if there's a giant cavern big enough for giants to be imprisoned or walk around in, and it's made of this hard, solid, crystallized rock and all that, it's going to really echo and transmit those sound waves. And it might sound like it's coming from outer space or from the sky to us, but when you really think about it, it makes more sense that they're coming from underground than coming in from some invisible source in the sky. And all these ancient traditions say that the giants are imprisoned underground. So if the giants are underground, what type of sounds would you expect to hear? Giant growls, giant footsteps, giant things being moved around by giants, and that's what the sounds sound like. Okay, so the sounds started in 2010. They occurred primarily for a few years. They tapered off a bit. They still occur, but it's a lot, less frequent now. So I don't know why it started up so many years ago. I don't have an explanation for that, but the sounds are real. They're definitely real. And you have other weird sounds that sound like UFO engines and bleeps and bloops and weird electronic things happening up in the sky, which may or may not sound like underground sounds. But the giant footsteps, growls, and moving things definitely sound like underground activity. And that is physical, tangible evidence because millions have heard these things, like in person. There's countless examples. They've all been in the news. So these types of things can't be ignored. And they are the type of physical, tangible, evidence of something giant being present underground. So, and the other thing I said before as well is that if you did have giants underground, there are underground water sources. Now, if the giants are emerging from deeper tunnel systems or whatnot, and they're looking their way for light, well, backtrack there. If a giant's imprisoned underground, yes, you're probably gonna have some big rocks and bars that might help keep it imprisoned. At some point, it might bust through or be let out of those bars, but then it's gonna have the task of finding its way to the surface. Underground doesn't have electricity, right? So they're gonna be in pitch black. So it could take them a long time to get to the surface, but the moment they get light cracking through, it's going to be like, oh, yeah, I know where to go. And they'll just follow that light. And they'll be strong enough to just break open tunnels and make them bigger if they need to get towards where they see that light. They're not going to be like little people stuck in a mine, right? They can make a mine if they need to. But they'll be looking for that light because otherwise they don't really know where to go other than using their hearing, perhaps. So I've always speculated and theorized that, if the giants are released or emerge in some form and they start getting thirsty and drink, maybe they have been asleep or some of them been asleep or whatever the reason, maybe they're thirsty to go on their journey to emerge onto the surface. They would drink all these underground water resources. Now, I'm not talking about like water tanks. I'm talking about like aquifers and underground rivers and lakes, ones in cavern systems, and it would probably have some effect on the surface. So I thought back then, I'm not a geologist, but it's possible if giants like that are real and they're that big and they're all drinking all that water, you might see water levels of certain bodies of water on the surface diminish a bit. Now, I know why the Euphrates River is low now. It's because of the dam. Okay, I'm not going to make some conspiracy theory that, oh, that's a cover because the giants are drinking the river. No, right? But you would see things like that taking place. But all of this interestingly connects because if they were to drink down water sources, or for whatever reason, water sources were to diminish down, that would expose more tunnel openings and give more chances for sources of light to open into. Now, if ancient peoples did know that the giants had been driven underground into cave systems, they probably were smart enough to seal off all those entrances with rocks. Not because the rocks would keep the giants from coming out, but because they're going to block all the points where the giants could see daylight come through and know where they could escape from easily, right? I'm pretty sure a massive giant couldn't punch its way out of the inside of a mountain. You got 500 feet of solid rock, the giant's going to punch through that. He could sit there punching for 1,000 years, nothing's going to happen. He'll just break all the bones in his body, right? But they're going to be looking for those points of light. So ancient peoples, I know traditions in North America, and you're not even supposed to talk about this, but elders of certain tribes, a big secret is that they know of certain entrances that lead down there to where the giants are, and they're usually blocked up, and foreigners and Westerners and the white man doesn't know where they are, and they're not supposed to know, and blah, blah, blah. And you got similar stories around the world anyways, right? So most likely ancient man would have blocked up these holes in hopes that the giants would never come back out. So the only thing that would be out of humans' control would be if water levels drop. So if like the Euphrates level dries up, like Revelation says would end up happening, I'm not saying the dam is fulfilling Revelations. I'm just saying it's following the same suit. If that level drops, that would open up possibilities for cave entrances to be exposed. That's something humans could never do unless they diverted the Euphrates River, right? So it's very, very interesting that, specifically the same river is exposing these openings now. I mean, who knows? I mean, there is a fake video. I'm pretty sure it's fake where they said they heard the fallen angels down in the river Euphrates, right? We have no way of doing if that's real. It sounds really fake to me. But again, that is the type of thing we could expect to see happen. So anyways, folks, that's it for my video. I didn't want it to go on any longer, but hope everybody enjoyed. Let's see if I can read some comments here real quick. Yeah, there's a lot of comments. I'll have to read them afterwards. Anyways, folks, thanks for coming by. Everybody take care. Again, I'm not trying to convince anybody that giants are coming in the end days, but it is possible. It is possible based on everything. So take care, folks.